The pack-led children gaped with wide bloodshot eyes at the teacher's words. The hairless apes of Earth, despised by all, had saved one of their own pack-led youths, plucking the infant from the crumbling claws of certain death. Elderly pack-led educator Gorzak surveyed the shocked 10-year-old pack-led faces in the class, a particularly sharp gaze aimed at young Sagan, before Gorzak continued his tale. Long have our kind whispered of Terrans and their planet, backwards Earth, crawling with primates that dare to dream. Speak, children. Tell me what truths you've heard of this human scourge. Small grey hands shot up, words flying in earnest. My mother says Earthers are made of violence, oozing aggression from every fleshy pore. Father told me humans are like unto beasts, barely tamed. I heard humans worship their feeble technology, bowing before its electric glow. Yes, yes, Gorzak croaked as he settled the excited pack-led youths. All these things hold kernels of truth. But even a stopped chrono is correct twice a rotation. For you see, children, when Sagan here was but an infant, no larger than my palm, his life hung by a thread over a yawning abyss, and it was human hands, so despised by us all, that saved young Sagan from certain doom. Gorzak paused for effect, letting the words hang heavy in the stunned classroom. Some 15 rotations passed. Sagan's parents traveled to Earth as part of a diplomatic mission to the human homeworld. It was then, on that loathed planet, that the very ground itself split open. The great city towers of the humans crashed down upon their builders, concrete and metal twisted into a hellish cage. The pack-led children shivered at the imagery, some covering their lobeless ears as if to block out the horrible sounds. Young Sagan just stared at his own hands, trembling in his lap. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance, Gorzak thundered. Both pack-led and human screams echoed from beneath the rubble. The puny rescue machines of the Terrans crumbled uselessly before the awesome destruction. It seemed even Earth itself wished to slay both invader and native-born. Gorzak peered out the window to the red-tinged sky of Pakilia Prime, twin suns dipping beyond the jagged mountains, before whispering to his pack-led pupils, the fate of young Sagan, and so many others, fell into the hands of but one human. Would Earth's native son rise to the challenge, or would he prove all our darkest fears true? Gorzak's voice lowered as he described the scene. The Terran city lay in ruins, great towers of glass and steel reduced to rubble. Cries of pain and fear echoed from the depths of the debris. It was then that Zachary Powell, a human firefighter aged 35 rotations, arrived at the site of destruction. The pack-led children leaned forward, hanging on Gorzak's every word. Zachary wasted no time. He donned his protective gear and began to pick his way through the unstable wreckage, his eyes scanning for any signs of life. The dust hung thick in the air, and the ground trembled with aftershocks, but Zachary pressed on undeterred. Gorzak mimed cupping a hand to his ear. Suddenly Zachary heard a sound, the faint, muffled cry of a baby. It came from beneath a massive slab of concrete, far too heavy for anyone being to lift, but Zachary had a tool, a machine that could exert great force. He positioned it carefully and began to lift the slab, inch by painstaking inch. The classroom was utterly silent now, the children hardly daring to breathe. As the slab rose, Zachary's heart clenched at what he saw. There lay Sagan's parents, gravely injured and unable to move. And there, cradled in his mother's arms, was the infant Sagan, miraculously alive but wailing in distress. Gorzak's voice grew heavy with emotion. Sagan's parents knew they could not save themselves. With their last breath they conveyed to Zachary a single plea, "Take our child, keep him safe," and Zachary, without a moment's hesitation, gently lifted the baby from his mother's arms. Young Sagan, sitting in the classroom, had tears streaming down his face. Gorzak placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder before continuing. Zachary secured the infant in a special protective pouch close to his chest. He knew he had to keep searching, that there were still others trapped in the rubble. So with Sagan safe in his care, the brave human soldiered on into the wreckage. Gorzak paused here, letting his words hang in the air. The children were on the edge of their seats, desperate to know what happened next. But the elderly teacher simply folded his hands, his story unfinished. "You see, children," Gorzak said softly. In that moment, Zachary embodied the very best of what humans could be. He showed selflessness, courage, a willingness to help others no matter their form. He prioritized the life of a Pakled child over his own safety. And that, my students, is a lesson we must never forget. Gorzak pauses momentarily, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing the tale. With the infant Sagan safely tucked against his chest, Zachary forged ahead into the ruins, his senses attuned to any signs of life. The twisted metal groaned ominously around him, and the ground shuddered beneath his feet. But the human remained steadfast in his mission. The Pakled children leaned forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. As Zachary navigated deeper into the collapsed structure, he heard a faint tapping sound. Following the noise, he came upon a group of our own kind, Pakled diplomats, including the esteemed Ambassador Zorax, trapped beneath a massive support beam. A gasp ripples through the classroom at the mention of such a high-ranking official. Zachary quickly took stock of the situation. The beam was too heavy for him to lift alone, even with his impressive human strength. But he had a tool, a hydraulic device capable of great force. With careful precision, he positioned the tool and began to lift the beam, centimeter by centimeter. Gorzak mimes the slow, steady lifting motion, his students hanging on his every word. As the beam rose, the trapped Pakleds were able to crawl out to safety. Zachary had saved them, demonstrating not only physical prowess, but also keen situational awareness and problem-solving skills under immense pressure. Qualities, I might add, that we Pakleds often struggle with in times of crisis. The students nod solemnly, absorbing this lesson. Zachary guided the diplomats towards the surface, where they were met by a newly arrived team of human rescue workers. In a show of trust, Zachary handed the precious baby Sagan to a medic before turning back to rejoin his fellow firefighters in their search for more survivors. Gorzak's voice swells with admiration as he describes the scene. The human rescuers worked as one, a well-oiled machine of cooperation and efficiency. They moved swiftly yet carefully through the debris, their actions coordinated and purposeful. It was a level of teamwork rarely witnessed among our people, who too often put self-interest above the needs of the collective. The elderly teacher lets his words hang in the air, a poignant reminder of the lessons to be learned from this fateful day. As the rescue effort stretched on, Gorzak continued, his voice heavy with empathy, Zachary and his fellow humans refused to give up. They worked tirelessly, their hands raw and their bodies pushed to the brink of exhaustion, and their persistence paid off. Dozens of lives were saved from the rubble, including Sagan's own parents, though they were gravely injured. The Pakled children gasped, some clasping their hands together in relief. With the survivors safely transported to human hospitals for urgent care, Zachary finally allowed himself a moment's respite. He sought out the medic who had been watching over baby Sagan, needing to see with his own eyes that the child was unharmed. Gorzak's eyes softened as he described the scene. There, amidst the chaos and destruction, Zachary cradled the infant Pakled against his chest. His uniform was torn and filthy, his face streaked with sweat and grime, but his hold on Sagan was gentle as a whisper. He spoke to the baby, words of comfort and reassurance as if this alien child were his own flesh and blood. The elderly teacher leaned forward, his voice dropping to a reverent hush. Unbeknownst to Zachary, a human news crew had captured this tender moment. The footage spread like wildfire across both Pakled and Terran media, a beacon of light in the dark aftermath of tragedy. The image of this human, battered but unbowed, treating a Pakled baby with such care. It became a symbol of the best of both our species, a reminder that compassion knows no boundaries of form or origin. Gorzak straightened, his gaze sweeping over the captivated classroom. In the days that followed, as the dust began to settle and the rebuilding commenced, something remarkable happened. Pakleds and humans, so long divided by mistrust and prejudice, began to work side by side. They shared resources, offered comfort, and slowly, tentatively, began to see each other not as alien beings, but as individuals united by the common threads of loss and hope. The teacher's voice swelled with emotion as he continued, and at the heart of this budding understanding was Zachary. Even as the crisis faded, he remained a constant presence at the hospital, visiting Sagan and his recovering parents. A bond had been forged between them, unbreakable as steel, a connection born of shared trauma and an act of pure selflessness. Gorzak regarded his students solemnly, letting the weight of his words settle upon their young shoulders. This, children, was the true turning point, not just for Sagan and his family, but for the relationship between our species. Gorzak's voice grew somber as he fast-forwarded the tale. The years passed, and young Sagan grew into a remarkable adult, inspired by the selfless bravery of Zachary Powell, the human who had saved his life as an infant. Sagan dedicated himself to bridging the divide between our peoples. The pack-led children listened with rapt attention, their eyes wide. Sagan became a diplomat, working tirelessly to forge connections and understanding. He negotiated treaties, established cultural exchange programs, and strove to create a future where pack-leds and humans could coexist in harmony. Gorzak sighed heavily, his aged voice tinged with sorrow. But tragedy struck once more. A few years after the fateful earthquake, news reached Sagan that Zachary Powell had perished while rescuing civilians from a burning building on Earth. Gasps of dismay echoed through the classroom. Sagan was devastated, Gorzak continued. He had maintained a close bond with Zachary, his savior and friend, but rather than succumbing to grief, Sagan channeled his pain into a renewed determination to honor Zachary's legacy. The elderly teacher's eyes shone with admiration as he spoke. Sagan redoubled his diplomatic efforts, working harder than ever to break down the barriers of prejudice and mistrust. It was a difficult road, as many on both sides still harbored resentment and suspicion. Gorzak leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. Sagan faced resistance at every turn. Some pack-leds accused him of betraying his own kind, while certain humans dismissed his efforts as naive or misguided. But Sagan persevered, driven by the memory of Zachary's sacrifice and the hope for a better tomorrow. The students sat in thoughtful silence, absorbing the weight of Gorzak's words. Sagan's journey has been one of perseverance in the face of adversity, the teacher emphasized. He has endured personal loss, societal pressure, and the constant challenge of changing hearts and minds. But through it all, he remains committed to his cause, striving to create a future where compassion and cooperation triumph over hatred and division. Gorzak's gaze swept over the classroom, meeting the eyes of each young pack-led. As Sagan continues his work, he carries with him the lessons learned from Zachary Powell and that fateful day so many years ago. He knows that the path to understanding and peace is not an easy one, but it is a noble pursuit nonetheless. The elderly teacher's voice grew soft yet filled with conviction. And that, my dear students, is the true legacy of Zachary Powell. Not just the lives he saved, but the seeds of hope and change he planted. Seeds that Sagan, and perhaps someday you yourselves, will nurture and grow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.